there, everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. Free agency is upon us, and the Philadelphia Eagles have not seemed to make quite as big of a splash this year as they did last year. The Philadelphia Eagles have let a number of players walk. They've done a number of trades. They have had a couple of signings, mostly last week, although they did pick up a couple of players over the course of the last couple of days. But at the end of the day, the Philadelphia Eagles haven't been as flashy in free agency this year. And they're poised to lose a number of players, depending on how things go, depending on which players are signing with other teams, which players might come back to the Eagles to try to get re-signed. And there's a lot of concern throughout the city with regard to these players potentially walking. And as I sit here today on the 1-year anniversary of Saquon Barkley officially signing his contract with the Philadelphia Eagles that brought him to this city to win Super Bowl 59, as I sit here watching all of this occur, I feel fairly calm. I don't feel that same sense of concern that the rest of the city seems to have. Here's why. First, we have to understand that last year the Eagles had to go in with a plan. The Eagles had just finished a collapse of historic proportions, probably the worst collapse in team history, in my opinion, certainly in my lifetime. And the Philadelphia Eagles needed to come out and say, we are addressing these catastrophic needs. And we are doing this in this fashion. And so that's why when free agency rolled around, it felt like the Eagles were doing a lot more. Now, it also felt like the Eagles were doing a lot more because the Eagles signed Saquon Barkley. But the Eagles did a lot more because they needed to. They had a plan that needed to address glaring needs on both sides of the football. And they did that. And that's why last year felt a little bit more high priority, felt a little bit more pressure to get things done, so to speak. Whereas this year, the Eagles don't have that. Yes, they have needs. Yes, those needs have to get addressed. But at the same time, the Philadelphia Eagles are in maintenance mode. They're the best team in the league. So the Eagles are doing a little bit more maintenance. They're just trying to set themselves up for a longer-term approach. Which brings me to the other reason why I'm not super concerned about these players walking, which the Eagles are allowing a lot of these free agents to simply walk. We've had Milton Williams sign with the New England Patriots. We've had Oren Burks sign with the Cincinnati Bengals. We've had Isaiah Rodgers sign with the Minnesota Vikings. We've had Josh Sweat sign with the Arizona Cardinals. The only two real trades that the Eagles have done was trade Chauncey Gardner-Johnson over to the Houston Texans for Kenyon Green and trade Kenny Pickett over to the Cleveland Browns for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Each one of the departures for the Philadelphia Eagles could be categorized as a performance-related departure or a cap-related departure. Take, for example, Milton Williams, who has already re-signed with the New England Patriots. He's been re-signed to a deal that has guarantees of $51 million, according to Over the Cap, $26 million average per year. The Eagles, as much as they appreciated Milton Williams' contributions on the defensive line, not re-signing him. It's not Javon Hargrave money from a couple years ago, but they're not re-signing him for that. The same general thing is also true of some of the players that the Eagles have let walk for performance reasons. James Bradbury has not yet been re-signed. He's probably not going to be re-signed. His performance really was not all that great, and the Eagles have a couple of younger guys on their team in the secondary that could take over that spot. Same thing with CJ Gardner-Johnson. One of the chief criticisms that I had of CJ Gardner-Johnson over the course of this year was the fact that he had a huge propensity for not wrapping up guys and bringing them to the ground. He had this huge propensity for just doing a hit and then a bounce off, which worked fine for some people, but was more of a miss than others. And if I'm noticing the problems with CJ Gardner-Johnson's tackling, imagine what a defensive coordinator, one of the 32 best defensive coordinators in the world, is able to notice. Kenyon Green was brought in. He will likely be one of those developmental cases. He'll need to spend some time in Stoutland University before he's going to be a real impact maker on the offensive line. Same thing with the other trade, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. The reason why you bring him in is to allow Tanner McKee to become your second string quarterback. Kenny Pickett, we saw a little bit of him over the course of the regular season. We definitely saw him in the Super Bowl where he led 2 3-and-outs. Kenny Pickett really didn't impress Philadelphians, even though he was from South Jersey. Bringing in somebody like Dorian Thompson-Robinson allows Tanner McKee to move up to the second string spot without any real expected fight, because Thompson-Robinson's performance really has not been great, and he's probably going to be spending a lot of his time on the inactive roster, on the practice squad, somewhere in that regard. But whether it's a situation where other GMs are afraid to pick up Howie Roseman's phone calls anymore, or whether or not it's something else, it's irresponsible of us to suggest that the Eagles are going into this without any kind of a plan. The plan just looks different than last year. But we're talking about the best GM in the league, Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman's a guy who summoned the office back after winning Super Bowl 52, saying that the team is a month behind the rest of the league. Howie Roseman has put together 2 Super Bowl appearing teams in the last 3 years. He's put together 2 Super Bowl winning teams in the last 8 years. We're looking at a Philadelphia Eagles team that has to get younger. We're looking at a Philadelphia Eagles team that has to prepare itself for the long term to be able to bring new players in. And we have to resist the temptation to just bring the band back together. Because bringing the band back together might be good initially, but it's not always in the best interest of the team. The Philadelphia Eagles certainly, after Super Bowl 52, kept a lot of the players around trying to make a run again. Same thing after Super Bowl 57. Kept a lot of the same pieces, and it didn't really work. And then the next most recent championship that we have in the city was the Philadelphia Phillies after the 2008 World Series victory. The Phillies brought a lot of those same players back from that 2008 team. They lost the World Series in 2009, and then it took them more than 10 years to get back to the World Series. So, while it may feel great to bring the band back together, so to speak, that's not what Howie's being paid for. And we see that with the extensions that the Philadelphia Eagles are making. Saquon Barkley, Zach Baun, 2 guys that Eagles fans had, I'm sure, at the top of their list to re-extend. The Eagles have also brought in A.J. Dillon from the Packers to sort of fill the spot that Kenny Gainwell filled now that Kenny Gainwell has signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Eagles brought in Joshua Uche from the Kansas City Chiefs through free agency. And as for the defense, well, I caught up with ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reed regarding a couple of players that he thinks could go to the Philadelphia Eagles.
I would love to see defensive tackle, especially if they end up losing Milton Williams to free agency. We know he's going to get a lot of money. So if they're not able to retain Milton Williams, I think defensive tackle definitely is one area that I could see them looking to address. 2 names I think they're going to like quite a bit, especially considering they're both explosive athletes. Kenneth Grant of Michigan is one I think they'll definitely take a liking to just because he's a wrecking ball, unlimited upside. I think his best days are ahead of him. But one name I think they're going to like a ton, and if he does slip, to earlier mid-20s, is Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. He checks a lot of boxes that they've looked for, especially at the position in years past. So those are 2 names I definitely think if they do start to slip a little bit, how it could get that itch of wanting to trade up to go get them.
The fact that the Eagles have acquired an absurd number of draft picks over the next 2 years. Their plan definitely seems to be a lot less flashy than last year, but that is absolutely necessary at this juncture, because the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions, and they just need to do maintenance. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your thoughts about how free agency is going? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and the Odyssey app, as well as iHeartRadio. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage, and if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below, or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles!